Only 5% of women can do these 5 things improve longevity and health today. A Simon Sinek inspired talk on solitude and self-growth. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a powerful truth. Most people will live their entire lives running from themselves, but a few, just a rare few, will have the courage to sit in silence and ask, who am I really? Those few, they are the ones who grow. They are the ones who lead. They are the ones who live longer, not just in years, but in meaning. Today, we're talking about the 5 things only 5% of women do, practices that don't just boost longevity and health, but radically redefine self-worth, fulfillment, and strength. And the journey starts not with action, but with solitude. Simon Sinek once said, "Working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion." But what if we don't know what we love? What if we've never paused long enough to ask? That's why solitude isn't isolation, it's activation. It's not where life ends, it's where your real life begins. Let's dive into the 5 things only a few women commit to, and how they build a legacy of health and deep personal power. Most people will spend their lives chasing answers outside themselves. Books, podcasts, mentors, trends. They search endlessly, but the answers they seek are not out there. They are already within. The real challenge isn't discovering something new, it's remembering what's been true all along. And to do that, one must first be willing to face the quiet. Self-awareness is not some grand epiphany that arrives in a moment of clarity. It's a slow, deliberate process of paying attention to your own thoughts, your own patterns, and your own beliefs. It's the discipline of observation without judgment, the ability to step back and say, this is who I am being, is this who I want to be? The most successful people, those who live with purpose and peace, have one thing in common: they know themselves, not just what they do, but why they do it. They've taken the time to understand what drives them, what scares them, what lights them up, and what shuts them down. They don't just live life, they design it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Self-awareness requires stillness, and stillness is something most people fear, not because they don't have time for it, but because deep down, they're afraid of what they might hear in the silence. We live in a world that rewards distraction, notifications, noise, constant scrolling. It keeps us busy, but not better. And when we finally have a moment to ourselves, we reach for more noise. Because silence feels like exposure. It's where the mask slips, where the real questions live, where the truth, unfiltered, starts to whisper. But that whisper is the beginning of everything. There's something powerful about being alone with your own thoughts, something raw. It strips away the performance. It removes the audience. It leaves just you with all your doubts, hopes, contradictions, and truths. It is in that space, uncomfortable as it may be, where transformation begins. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see, and you cannot see it if you never stop to look. People say they want to grow. They want clarity. They want peace. But very few are willing to sit still long enough to hear their own soul speak. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It waits patiently for you to become quiet enough to notice it. Now, there's a misconception that solitude is the same as loneliness, that sitting in silence means something is missing. But the truth is, solitude is not emptiness. It is presence. It is the rare and sacred space where you can finally hear what the world drowns out. It's not about being away from others. It's about being with yourself fully and honestly. And it's in this presence that self-awareness is born. Once you begin to develop this inner awareness, everything changes. Your choices become more intentional. Your relationships become more honest. Your habits shift from reactive to reflective. You begin to ask better questions of yourself, of others, of life. And those questions shape the trajectory of everything that comes after. But awareness alone is not enough. You must also be willing to detect that awareness, to build boundaries around what you've come to understand about yourself, to stand in the truth you've uncovered, even when the world pressures you to return to who you used to be. That's where the second part comes in, the strength to say no. Most people believe saying no is an act of rejection, that it pushes people away or shuts down opportunity. But the reality is, no is one of the most generous words you can say, both to yourself and to others. Because when you say no to what drains you, you make space for what fulfills you. When you say no to things that are misaligned, you say yes to authenticity. But saying no is hard, especially for those who have spent their lives being accommodating, especially for women who are often taught that their value lies in their availability, their helpfulness, their yes. But every yes that comes from guilt or obligation erodes your self-respect just a little more. Every yes that violates your boundaries is a quiet betrayal of your own truth. That's why the ability to say no clearly, kindly, unapologetically is one of the most powerful indicators of self-growth. It means you've done the work to know what you want. It means you're willing to honor that knowledge. And it means you trust yourself enough to face the discomfort of disappointing others in service of not disappointing yourself. Saying no is not selfish. It is self-honoring. It teaches others how to treat you, not by what you tolerate, but by what you protect. And once you start saying no from a place of clarity rather than fear, you'll realize something remarkable. The world doesn't end. The people who truly value you will respect your boundary. And those who don't, well, that's a gift too. It shows you exactly where you've been overextending yourself. Self-awareness and the ability to say no are not grand gestures. They are quiet revolutions, the kind that shape lives from the inside out. They are not loud, but they are lasting. Not easy, but essential. And the best part, anyone can begin. All it takes is the willingness to pause, to listen, to decide. The real growth is not found in doing more. It's found in doing less, more intentionally. We often look at longevity as something far off in the distance, something we might think about when we hit a certain age or get a wake-up call. But the truth is, longevity doesn't begin later, it starts now. It starts in the small, almost invisible choices we make every day. Not the dramatic overhauls or impossible routines, but the quiet consistency of taking care of what we've been given. The body is not just a machine we operate, it's a relationship we're in. And like any relationship, it responds not just to how it's treated, but to the intention behind that treatment. When we move, not out of punishment, but out of care, something shifts. Movement stops being a chore. It becomes a conversation, a thank you, a way of saying, I'm still here and I'm not giving up on you. But most people don't move with love. They move with resentment. They exercise to erase something, to undo damage, to fit in. They treat their bodies like problems to be solved instead of partners to be supported. And that's why it doesn't last. Because guilt is a terrible motivator. It burns fast, but it never sustains. The few who break out of this cycle don't move more, they move differently. They understand that the point of movement is not to shrink the body, but to wake it up. They walk, they stretch, they dance, they lift. Not because they hate how they look, but because they value how they feel. They make movement a lifestyle, not a fix. And it's not about perfection, it's about showing up, even for 10 minutes. Even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Because every time you move, you cast a vote for your future self. You say, you matter to me. And those votes add up. They become strength. They become endurance. They become longevity. What we often forget is that the body is not separate from the mind. When we move with intention, we think more clearly. We breathe more deeply. We sleep more soundly. Our emotions become less reactive. Our stress becomes more manageable. And we begin to feel grounded again, not just in our bodies, but in our lives. But just as movement feeds our longevity, so does something even more intimate, what we put into our bodies. Food is one of the most personal decisions we make, and yet for many, it's one of the most disconnected. We've been conditioned to think of food in categories, good and bad, clean and dirty, allowed and forbidden, and that binary thinking is exhausting. It creates guilt where there should be awareness, shame where there should be curiosity. The rare few who step outside that loop do something different. They see food as fuel, as information, as a form of communication. They understand that what they eat doesn't just affect how they look, it affects how they think, how they recover, how they show up in the world. It's not about restriction, it's about intention. There's a massive difference between eating to suppress an emotion and eating to support your energy. One creates a cycle, the other builds resilience. When you eat with purpose, you begin to listen to your body in a way most people never do. You notice how it responds. You notice what drains you and what sustains you. You develop a sense of respect, not rules. Food becomes a way of caring for yourself, not controlling yourself. You begin to ask, what will help me feel strong today? Instead of, what will make me feel less guilty? You stop chasing diets and start building habits. And those habits, they become the foundation of your health. Not just physical, but emotional and mental as well, because food is not just calories. It's chemistry. It affects your hormones, your clarity, your immunity, your mood. Every meal is a message. And the more aware you are of that message, the more power you have to shape the outcome. But this kind of awareness doesn't come from a book or a meal plan. It comes from listening, from trial and error, from slowing down long enough to notice. And most people never slow down. They eat on autopilot. They move on autopilot. They live on autopilot. That's why the 5% are different. They don't wait for a crisis to make changes. They don't wait until they've hit rock bottom to start paying attention. They start now, with small steps, with a shift in mindset, with a willingness to stop numbing and start noticing. They don't move because they hate their bodies. They move because they love what their bodies allow them to do. They don't eat because they're trying to fix something broken. They eat because they want to feel alive. That mindset changes everything. And when you combine those two things, intentional movement and purposeful nourishment, you build a life of momentum. Not extreme highs and lows, but steady, compounding energy. You build a body you can trust, not fight against. You build a rhythm that lasts. Longevity isn't something you chase when you get older. It's something you build right now with every step you take and every bite you choose. Not out of pressure, out of respect. Not for a goal, but for a life. Most people are not taught how to feel. They are taught how to react. They are taught to manage the visible, not the invisible, to perform strength, not to practice it. From a young age, emotions are labeled as things to avoid, to hide, to get over. But in reality, emotions are not problems. They're signals. And those signals, when understood, become power. What separates those who thrive from those who survive isn't that they don't experience fear or sadness or anger. It's that they learn how to hold those emotions without being consumed by them. They learn to observe instead of react, to pause instead of lash out. They develop an inner language, one that gives them clarity instead of chaos. It's easy to be calm when things are going well. It's easy to be kind when everyone agrees with you. It's easy to be composed when nothing is triggering you. But emotional mastery is not tested in ease. It's tested in tension. And very few people choose to sit with tension long enough to understand it. Most would rather escape it, distract from it, blame someone else for it. But here's the truth. Growth doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from walking through it, eyes open, heart open, asking, what is this here to teach me? That question alone can change your entire approach to life, because it shifts you from being a victim of your feelings to becoming a student of them. And when you become a student, you become free. Free to respond instead of react. Free to navigate conflict without losing your values. Free to feel deeply without being destabilized. The people who truly grow are not the ones who have fewer problems. They are the ones who are willing to look at themselves more honestly. They learn to welcome the full range of emotion, not just the comfortable ones. And they learn to recognize that emotions don't define them, they reveal them. Each one pointing to something deeper, a value, a wound, a need, a belief. Emotional mastery doesn't mean being positive all the time. It doesn't mean pushing away pain or faking peace. It means facing what's real, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when it challenges your identity, especially when it humbles you. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's a practice. It requires patience. It requires presence. It requires the willingness to be wrong, to be vulnerable, to be open to change. This is where most people fall short. They want the result of growth, but not the responsibility. They want transformation, but they don't want to feel the discomfort that transformation demands. So they look for shortcuts, hacks, formulas. They chase the illusion of a breakthrough, not the reality of consistent, uncomfortable daily work. But the truth is, there are no hacks for growth. There are only habits. The 5%, the ones who truly change, don't rely on motivation. They build systems. They don't wait to feel ready. They create routines that support their goals, even when they don't feel like showing up. They understand that discipline is more compassionate than chaos. That structure gives you freedom. That small choices, repeated over time, build identity. They don't need to reinvent their lives overnight. They just need to make one better decision today than they did yesterday, and then repeat again and again until their habits reflect their values, not their moods. This is the difference most people never recognize, that the real transformation doesn't happen in some big, traumatic change. It happens in the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching, in the way you talk to yourself when you fail, and the choices you make when it could be easier to numb out, in how you treat your body, your mind, your time, especially when you're tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed. Anyone can perform well when they feel good, but the ones who grow don't depend on feeling good. They create habits that carry them through the days they don't. They replace self-sabotage with self-respect. They don't just react to life, they respond to it with clarity, with consistency, and with the willingness to keep learning. And here's what's really powerful. When you focus on habits over hacks, you stop chasing outcomes. You start building foundations. You stop needing external validation to stay committed. You start trusting the process. And over time, that trust becomes confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. This kind of growth doesn't look impressive at first. It doesn't show up in flashy results or dramatic moments. It shows up in the way you carry yourself, in how you handle a tough conversation, in how you bounce back from a setback, in how you lead yourself before you ever try to lead anyone else. And that's why only a few ever get there. Because it's not glamorous, it's not easy, it's not fast, but it's real, it's lasting, it's meaningful. You don't need more hacks. You need more honesty. You don't need to feel ready, you need to begin. You don't need to fix yourself, you need to know yourself. That's where the real work begins, and that's where the real freedom lives. It's easy to surround yourself with people, friends, coworkers, family, social networks. It can look like connection, but quantity is not the same as quality. The real question is, who sees you when you're not performing? Who challenges you to grow when it would be easier to agree with your comfort? Who speaks to your potential, not just your present? Very few people will ask themselves these questions because it forces them to confront something uncomfortable, that not every relationship in their life is aligned with where they're going. Some are attached to an older version of who they were. Some depend on them staying small, and others, though familiar, are quietly draining. That's why only a small percentage of people ever take inventory of their relationships, not out of judgment, but out of awareness. They understand that the people around you are not neutral. They either elevate you or exhaust you. They either pull you forward or hold you in place. And the longer you stay in proximity to those who don't reflect your values, the more you compromise the very growth you've worked so hard for. This doesn't mean cutting everyone out. It means learning to be intentional. It means being honest about who adds energy to your life and who consistently takes it away. It means choosing depth over convenience, presence over popularity. It's about building a circle that holds you accountable, not to who you were, but to who you're becoming. Some people will misunderstand us. They'll say, "You've changed." And they're right. You have. Because growth requires change. Evolution demands distance from the patterns that no longer serve you, and not everyone is willing to grow at the same pace or in the same direction. That's not a failure, that's a filter. One of the most courageous things you can do is outgrow a version of yourself in front of people who expect you to stay the same. To keep choosing alignment over approval, to keep honoring your path even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because the relationships that are meant to last will not ask you to dim your light. They will ask you to shine brighter, and they'll rise with you, not resent you. This kind of community doesn't happen by accident. It's built through small moments, through real conversations, through mutual values, not just mutual interests. And it starts with you becoming someone who also reflects growth, integrity, and presence. Like attracts like. So the more aligned you become, the more aligned people you'll attract. But even in the strongest communities, there's one relationship that determines everything else, the one you have with yourself. And that relationship is shaped every day by what you consume. Most people think of consumption as food or media, but it's deeper than that. It's the conversations you allow, the thoughts you repeat, the environments you tolerate, the standards you normalize. All of it is consumption, and all of it shapes your mindset. You cannot plant seeds of clarity in soil that's filled with noise. You cannot build confidence when you constantly feed yourself comparison. You cannot create peace when your inputs are rooted in fear, judgment, or chaos. That's why the 5% protect their attention like a sacred resource. They understand that what you feed your mind becomes your perspective, and your perspective becomes your reality. So they choose wisely. They curate what they listen to. They limit what drains them. They seek out ideas, people, and environments that reinforce growth, not stagnation. And here's the truth. This is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that your mindset is not a fixed trait. It's a garden, and what grows in it depends entirely on what you water. Most people don't realize how powerful that is. They think they're stuck with the mind they've got, but the mind is malleable. It responds to repetition, to belief, to focus. When you begin to change what you consume, you begin to change what you believe is possible. And when that shifts, everything else does too. Your confidence, your creativity, your courage. They all expand when you stop feeding yourself the narrative of limitation, when you stop giving energy to voices that say, you can't, and instead start listening to the quiet voice inside that says, keep going. That voice needs space to grow. It needs silence. It needs distance from the noise. It needs you to stop giving your best attention to your worst distractions. This is where transformation really begins, not in the dramatic changes, but in the subtle shifts. In choosing reflection over reaction, curiosity over criticism, substance over stimulation. The people who change their lives are not the ones who do the most. They're the ones who do the right things consistently. They surround themselves with people who sharpen them, and they protect their minds from what dulls them. They understand that growth is not just what you do, it's what you allow, what you welcome in, what you give space to, what you believe. And that belief, it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from building a life where your habits, your relationships, and your mindset all speak the same language. Not everyone will choose this path, but those who do, quietly, steadily, consistently, they're the ones who don't just live longer. They live deeper. They don't just get through life, they grow through it.